The federal government has officially abandoned its plan to greatly expand the list of banned guns in this country. It is still pressing ahead with the ban on assault-style weapons announced in 2020, but it's walking back earlier attempts to ban a long list of weapons that critics said would ban popular hunting rifles. Instead, the government is proposing a new definition for what qualifies as a prohibited firearm in the criminal code, but it will only apply that definition to guns designed and manufactured after that definition becomes law, which means many weapons that fall short of the assault-style ban will remain legal, even though survivors of gun violence say that will leave hundreds of deadly weapons in circulation.
We are stunned today by what we perceive to be a total capitulation of the Trudeau government before the NDP's duplicitous stand on banning assault weapons. The weak amendments that are substituting G4 and G46 do not constitute a ban on assault weapons.
Marco Mendicino is the Minister of Public Safety. He joins you now from the House of Commons foyer. Minister, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
What do you say to groups like we just heard there, like Police Souvienne, that say you're abandoning them by abandoning your expanded list of banned guns?
Well, I have nothing but the utmost respect for the victims and survivors of Police Souvienne. I've gotten to know them, and I would say our work has been both inspired and informed by the ideas they've given us, and that is reflected in the amendments that we're going to be putting forward, as well as some other reforms, which will strengthen the national ban on assault-style firearms. These are AR-15 guns that have no place in our communities. We'll always have an open door. I'll also say we've put the work in with parliamentarians. 3 of the 4 major parties support the reforms and the amendments that we put forward today. We still obviously have some work to do, but by taking this step, we will be building on Bill C-21, which is the most significant gun control legislation in a generation.
I watched the reaction today, though, Minister. They say this approach is much too weak. The amendments you're proposing will only cover future weapons, banning guns of the future, not the guns that are in circulation today.
I would say that the language that we put forward to strengthen the ban on assault-style firearms builds on the Mass Casualty Commission final report. We've literally taken a look at that language and lifted it and put it into our amendment. I would say beyond that, we've also committed to taking action against large capacity magazines, which can turn a gun into a mass shooter. And we've also said that we are going to reestablish a consultation committee to get the government advice on what to do about the existing market. We want to make sure we get this right. This has been a debate, as you know, David, that has been subject to a lot of disinformation and polarization. It's the Conservatives who do a lot of that. We need to take the politics out of that and make sure we get this debate right.
Right, but it got pretty political last November, Minister, when Liberals went to the committee with a long list of weapons that were called surprise amendments that took everyone off guard to try to add to the banned gun list. And I remember the debate. Liberals from the Prime Minister on down told us last November that this long list of guns had to be banned to keep people safe, but now you're not banning them. So how will people be safe if this long list of guns are still allowed to stay in circulation?
By making sure that we strengthen the ban against assault-style firearms, which is what we're proposing to do, by taking action against large capacity magazines, which we're going to do in the very near term, by making sure that we establish a committee to get advice, and this is all designed to make sure that we build on the national ban on assault-style firearms, which we put in place in 2020. This is all in addition to Bill C-21, which already represents the most significant stride in a generation when it comes to gun control. This is how we're going to reduce gun violence. This is how we're going to protect Canadians.
Right, but I remember, take for example the SKS, a very popular hunting rifle that isn't covered by the assault-style weapons ban, but was on the list of weapons that was brought to the committee in November. I remember we talked about this, and you referenced that this was a weapon that was used in a police killing in the GTA. Now, with these changes today, that weapon is not going to be banned. So why was this a weapon that ended up on a list deliberately just a few months ago that now all of a sudden is fine to stay in circulation?
Well, you're right. The SKS has created devastation, and I've been to funerals for 10 police officers, including the 2 that were very tragically killed in South Simcoe. But here is what our package will do today. Our package will take that next concrete step to strengthen the ban on assault-style firearms. We're going to set up that committee to take a look at how we deal with firearms models, including the SKS, and we're going to get that advice back. And while we debate these important points, I think it's also important for folks to understand where the Conservatives stand on this issue, which is to make AR-15 style firearms legal again. And the 2 visions that are before Canadians is Do we want stronger gun control laws when it comes to these guns that were designed for a battlefield, or do we want weaker gun laws that would make them legal again? The vast majority of Canadians are with us.
But Minister, help me understand it. There's these weapons that are like the AR-15 and the assault-style weapons that you banned in the Order in Council in May of 2020. That's when you ran on this in 2019. That was the first big move. But then there's this whole other category of weapons that you felt the need. I mean, that list didn't appear out of thin air. Felt the need to ban, and now the amendments you're talking about today, it makes it very clear that the changes would not affect the classification of existing firearms in the Canadian market. It's only going to cover firearms designed and manufactured after all of this becomes law. So there's this huge middle ground of weapons that you targeted in November that are going to be free to circulate in Canada and be stockpiled by people because of these changes?
I'll tell you something very clearly, David. The ground is shrinking beneath the feet of any criminal that would try to use an AR-15 style gun to visit damage and carnage to any community, because we put in place a national ban and order through an order in council in 2020. Because today we're prepared to take the next step in introducing a technical definition that is based on the Mass Casualty Commission final report. And because our government is committed to taking action against large capacity magazines, as well as getting advice on how to deal with the existing market. It is the totality of all of those things that allow this government to do the work that is necessary to keep our Canadians and our communities safe from gun violence.
You referenced the Mass Casualty Commission there. In the past, you've cited the Polytechnique shootings, the Quebec mosque shootings. Other members of your government have done this as justification for the gun policies. But today, representatives of Polytechnique and the Quebec mosque, they raced to Ottawa when they heard what you're going to do to hold a news conference, and they called your plan a betrayal. How do you square that with what you're saying?
Well, look, I've been on the phone with them and have been working around the clock with not only Public Safety and many other victim survivors groups right across the country. I would point out that Docs for Gun Control has been very supportive, that the Coalition for Gun Control has been very supportive of the reform packages that we put out. I think because they see their ideas represented in this set of reforms and the amendments which we're going to introduce to strengthen Bill C-21, which, don't forget, will implement a national handgun freeze, will give law enforcement additional tools to crack down on traffickers, and which will introduce red flag and yellow flag laws to reverse the connection between domestic abuse and the presence of guns. And this doesn't just reflect the recommendations of the Mass Casualty Commission, it reflects the vast majority of parliamentarians, the vast majorities of where Canadians are at. We need stronger gun controls so that AR-15 style guns are not allowed to stay in our communities, and that's precisely what the package today will do.
But I'm sure you were briefed on that press conference today where they called this a capitulation to the New Democrats, while Pauli Souvien called a duplicitous stand on assault rifles. Were you unable to get the NDP on board with your initial plan, and this is the compromise?
We've been working extremely hard with our colleagues across the aisle, and I think that's what Canadians want. They don't want toxicity. They don't want polarization. They don't want to see Conservatives teaming up with special interests in the gun lobby who are quite literally crowding out, and through intimidation, through violence and threats that we see represented online when it comes to having a debate that should be based on facts and not fear. What Canadians are entitled to get from a government is a government that will reach across the partisan line, and that is exactly what we are doing with both the Bloc and the NDP, and that is the way in which we're going to get this law and these reforms passed.
Right, so what stops people from stockpiling weapons today that you wanted to ban in November that will no longer be banned based on this shift?
Well, as you know, we've taken the time to get this package to where it is right now, which means amendments that will include a new technical definition, a commitment to tackle ghost guns, a commitment to take a look at the way in which we can get manufacturers on board in the classification of guns. But with regards to the existing market, I think I've identified some very concrete answers on how the government will remain vigilant. The ongoing application of the order in council in 2020, the technical definition that it was introduced today going forward, a commitment to tackle large capacity magazines, and finally setting up that advisory committee so the government can get the best nonpartisan, independent advice from Canadians right across the country on this issue. It's too important to let it go. That's why we've got to keep pushing forward.
Okay, so Minister, when does all of this get done? Because we've had 2 elections on this, and a lot of the gun policies are still a work in progress. So what is the target date for the full implementation of all of this?
I'd like to see it get done as quickly as possible. I have been encouraged by the progress that we have made with the NDP and the Bloc. Of course, it's always possible we'll see the Conservatives filibuster, so we've got to account for that. But I'm going to work around the clock, and I was very happy to see today that we were able to make this next step, and certainly to be surrounded by our amazing Liberal caucus, people like Rachel Ben-Dian from Montreal, people like Marc Sauret from Northern Ontario, people like Steph Lauzon from Quebec, people from right across the country, Pam Demoff from 905 region in the GTA, who's my parliamentary secretary. We've got the team who is working around the clock to get this bill passed as quickly as possible.
Okay, Marco Mendicino, Minister of Public Safety, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.